I'm here with Kajal again today. And Kajal, I was just saying, I don't really know what to expect from this conversation, but I enjoyed our last conversation about vulnerability so much.
Mm.
And it's one of the, in fact, it is the most watched of the videos that I've done recently. And a couple of people have said to me, oh yeah, I watched that one on vulnerability, and oh, this is what I think about vulnerability. And
Oh, awesome.
yeah, I've had some really nice feedback about it. Um, and we were just emailing back and forth, and I was like, oh, I'd just love to chat to Kajal again. I said, okay, let's have another conversation. I'd love to talk to you about power, how to own your power, what the barriers are,
Mm.
what's the relevance of power to business. And I mean, I think to a certain degree, or certainly from a hierarchical, like a hierarchy perspective, the relationship of businesses to power is kind of obvious. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
there's this hierarchy and the power's at the top, and the people at the top tell the other people what to do and they do it, and that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, that's not what I'm about.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's what you're about. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not what my work is about in terms of leading beyond hierarchy. And more, I sort of get the impression that at a very kind of collective, sort of general sense, we are maybe this is a question, are we changing our ideas of what power looks like? Are we changing our relationship with power? Are we more ready for different models of
Mm-hmm.
power?
Mm-hmm.
And I know, like in the work that I do, there are things like the tools and the processes and the structures that support different models of power.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I know that you're really going to relate to is that the other big part of what I do is like the internal work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's supporting people to really think about what their own relationship to power is. Do they feel empowered? Do they feel powerless?
Mm-hmm.
How do they give away their power? How do they claim power because they like a feeling of control, or they like a feeling of responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm opening up the whole
Yeah.
whole spectrum of this conversation. But when I emailed you and you wrote back and was like, yeah, you said, I'd love to chat again. I love this conversation about power. What sprung to mind for you when I suggested this as a conversation? What is it about power and empowering ourselves that is interesting to you?
Well, I find it interesting because I would say for me personally too, but as I have talked to people, worked with people, realize that so many of us feel powerless. And it's always gotten me so curious as to why. Why do so many of us feel powerless and so out of touch or out of connection with our power? And if you look at societal, cultural norms, paradigms, power tends to be a very external thing, right? It tends to be something that someone has and someone is praised for or even rewarded for in a way or worshipped for, and everybody else is like beneath or inferior or powerless in comparison. And I always found that concept so interesting. Why as human beings we crave power. We crave to be in control and in charge and to be praised and loved and validated and seen as this like kind of like godlike figure, all knowing, all seeing authority. And I think in the context of the world we live in today, power tends to be associated with authority. Whoever has the most power tends to have the most authority, has the most say in terms of how structure systems down to like how society even functions. And to me, that feels so, I don't know, it just feels so barbaric in a way. Like very, I feel somehow it feels very like it's from like the monarchy tradition, and like, when we had kings and queens and there was peasants and things like that, and it's like somehow we've still carried that out. But at the same exact time, going through the pandemic the past 2 years, you've also seen so many people question the role of people in power, and kind of be like, can they be trusted? Are they actually a wise voice about this subject? Or you can see this conversation of people who use their power as a way to maintain order or structure or authority or control are being challenged, and they're being challenged by the normal person. It's not they're being challenged by somebody else in power. So I was
How
thinking,
do you see that happening? Sorry to interrupt. How do you see that power being challenged in that way?
I think I think well, it's different. I don't know what the climate in the UK is like, but in the US, it's like there's this deep level of mistrust with people in power that has come up, and a lot of questioning of, is this person actually a phony, or they're the real deal? Can they be trusted to make decisions that affect me in my life and things like that? And I think with this whole concept of power, there's this whole entire wave, if you want to call it, of discernment coming up too, of people learning to trust their power over exerted power that's coming from an outside force. And so I think the shift that's really happening in humanity right now is that sense of empowerment of people stepping into their own power.
No. What do you think? You said, I really like how you use the word discernment, and people kind of discerning around other people with power. Can I really trust this person? But also coming into a more discerning sense of trusting their own power. What does that look like for you? Or what does it feel like? What do you see? Like when someone is discerning of their own power and trusts their own power,
Mm,
how do you see that? What do
mm.
they do? Or how does it feel?
It's really good. That's a really good question. The This is something that I have been thinking in contemplation a lot with about. For me, it's the concept of authority, and the question that I have asked myself personally, and I like to ask other people, especially people that I'm working with, because when with my one-on-one with clients, we really do a lot of empowerment, helping you step into your power, own who you are. Is, who is the authority in your life, right? Who is the authority here? And oftentimes people realize the authority is their government or their education or their husband or their money, even their career. And that's how they make their choices, how they make their decisions. That's how they are being who they are in the world. And I think when you start to ask yourself the questions around, who is the authority of my life, who is the authority of me, and of course you can say, yeah, it's me, duh. But if you sincerely ask yourself that question, you realize that I don't feel powerful in my own life. I'm just taking orders, or I'm just listening, or I'm easily influenced by what everyone else is around me doing, especially those people who hold a lot of, let's just say, external forms of power in society. They're influencing my decisions, my choices, how I'm showing up, how I'm choosing a career, even, or a husband, or managing my finances, or how I'm showing up online. I think that's a very important question in life. And I would say for me personally, I felt powerless a lot growing up as a child, because my dad is an extremely controlling person who loves to be in charge and tell other people what to do. And he did that to me my whole entire life. So I have I have felt powerless my whole entire life, feeling like I had no choice here. I had no say. I had to do what he wanted me to do because I had to basically please him or fit into what he wanted, right? And that's often what makes us feel powerless, like out of control of our own life. And for me, that has felt it's a very fearful place to be. And you're very easily manipulated, and you can form very people pleasing toxic patterns and codependency with others. Your sense of self is really derived from what people think of you and how people perceive you and how they accept or love you. Um, and if I were to say, what does it feel like to claim that back? I think it's kind of a sense of freedom, but along the way it also feels extremely scary because for the first time you get to be in charge here, and there's nobody you have to, like, what's the word, nobody you have to, like,
Be accountable to.
accountable to, exactly, or obligated to,
And
or
I think it also means that you because when you were talking about the sort of the negatives of being around people who have a certain amount of power over you, or just not necessarily even in an intentional way, but just people that really like to be in control, in charge. But I can also see that that can be a real place of comfort for some people for exactly that reason, because actually cracking through that place where you do feel powerless, it means you have to take more responsibility, and you can't sort of outsource your power. You can't give it away. You can't, or at least it's less easy to blame others
yes,
when you
yes.
really own your power. And that's where I think it is interesting what you said, that you think there's a little bit more sort of discernment happening,
Hmm.
because I'm not sure, like, I see a lot of power being shifted towards social media
Hmm.
in many ways. And that's a real polarity right there, because on the one hand, we can then take control, like we can literally author things, we can publish, we can share, post, comment. And so in some ways it's a real gift of power to
Hmm.
everyone, but also the way that um, there is no kind of governing body. There's nobody checking, okay, is this factually correct? Is this responsible broadcasting? That it kind of, I do also see that power can be taken away from us quite a lot through
Hmm.
social media as well. And so I'm not sure I necessarily see so much of a discernment around power that you're saying. And actually what I see probably is more like the difficulties, the barriers. If you are someone that has tended to claim a lot of power, then that is an extremely challenging thing to sort of let go of and dissolve, because there's a reason that you like to have that control. And similarly, if you are someone that has tended to be controlled by others in some way, or has given away their power, that is also extremely challenging to kind of break through the barriers and claim that back. And I kind of see, with guess we're talking about it at quite a deep level, but I really see this playing out in businesses and in teams, at that sort of micro level.
What I feel like true power doesn't need to control anybody, right? True power knows that power is not something I acquire or gain. It is something I already have. And if I already have it, then it's a matter of embodying it and being in it versus outsourcing it or trying to get other people or using other people as a means to feel good about myself. I think a lot of power is a way of manipulating other people to feel good about yourself because there's a lot of insecurities going on within yourself. And when you don't have that, you're actually in your real power, which is something that can never be taken away from you.
Mm.
Can I say something about the self-responsibility piece that you were talking about earlier?
Definitely.
I think the reason this kind of comes back to self-responsibility a little bit. I think the greatest challenge of the human being is to accept self-responsibility. And the greatest dis-ease of the human being is to become a victim. Where we tend to be in victim all the time. I need this to change. I need you to change. I need this to be like this for me to feel better, for me to feel secure, for me to get what I want, for me to be successful, whatever. And that's outsourcing your power all the time. But that's what makes you also very controllable and feeling powerless, actually. The more you live your life as a victim and the more you identify as a victim, the more powerless you actually feel. Because you need all these variables in your life to accommodate you and for you to feel good or feel powerful. And I think it's actually the most hardest and most challenging thing for every human being to accept self-responsibility. And I think the minute we do that, we start to taste what power feels like, real power feels like.
It's touching on the experience of how we experience both kind of positive experiences but also negative ones, the like the
Yeah.
good and the bad, and owning that neither one is actually good or bad, and like truly accepting our life experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you spoke about true power as well, God, there's so much that you've just said. You feel like you've just like cracked this conversation wide open. And it's like, okay, true power for me, what came up for me was the spiritual concept of masculine and feminine energy. Like, and that for me is kind of like the pathway to true power.
Mm.
And from the sense of kind of masculine being the sort of the direction,
Mm-hmm.
the drive, the action, but
Mm-hmm.
also the boundaries,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The structure.
the structure and the boundaries, and the feminine. And when that is in a healthy expression,
Action, yes.
especially when it is then also accompanied by a healthy expression of feminine being this sort of free flowing expression,
Mm-hmm.
and the two need each other,
Brother,
right? The
yes.
two need each other inside each of us as individuals. That for me is sort of, that's kind of like my handbook,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
guess, for true power. But then also just to kind of like ground us back in like the real world a little bit, not that that's not real, but like to ground us into our societal experiences and our everyday. I want to ask you how does true power express itself in day to day, in a business, for example?
Mm-hmm. I was just curious. The word empower keeps coming up for me, and I wanted to just Google the definition of it real quick, just so I could see it. Um, give someone the authority or power to do something. Empower. So if we're talking about true power here, you're giving yourself the authority and the power to do whatever it is that you want to do versus waiting on somebody else to give you the power to do it. That's again coming back to self responsibility there. And the other definition is making someone stronger or more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. Again, it comes back to the self-responsibility piece. It feels like without the self-responsibility piece, we can't really get acquainted and explore the concept of power within us that is already there. And I think this is why like empowerment is so big right now. People want to be empowered and empower themselves and stand up for who they are and speak their truth. Because I think everybody deep down is craving to become in control, become their own authority. What was the question though? I just had that like come up. I wanted to share it.
Question was, how do you see true power being expressed in a very sort of real grounded way?
I think it I
For
think
example, in a business.
I think it's all about like I have a business, and for me it's always about being my authority and doing things that honor me, that respect me, that um that celebrate me and my ideas and my knowledge and my offerings and my gifts. I think in a business setting, it's really about you knowing your value and what you bring to the table and being secure in that, right? Because the more you are able to embody that or be that, you are in your power then, right? Versus then you're not coming from a place of proving yourself. You're coming from a place of giving yourself. There's a very big difference between proving yourself and giving yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is such a great way to kind of ground into your power, is to build that confidence and that security around what exactly makes you unique and what you have to offer. Because there's no one in the world who's going to do it like you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's the exploration of that can be a tangible way to understand your power.
Yeah, I also see that if we think about businesses as like a sort of a case study here as an example, I think that being in your true power, because a business really is about kind of setting an intention of wanting to kind of fulfill some kind of purpose or deliver some kind of service in the world. And generally it's a product or a service that requires multiple people to deliver it. Hence you set up a business and you grow. So I think there's something about being in your true power that is about really having a lot of clarity around what that vision is.
Yes.
And
Yes.
really being able to articulate that so that other people can see that and make a choice as to whether to align to that or not.
Exactly.
And then I also think there's something that you keep touching on about sort of like waiting for approval, like needing to get approval or waiting for approval. But like in your true power, that becomes far less important, right? So you're able to sort of create this vision and invite people to join without needing to control or cajole others or
Convince.
kind of convince.
Really,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think, but I I feel like we're talking at a little bit of a almost hypothetical level in some way, and the realities of the human experience are that, I don't know, dare I say that we're quite a long way from being able to own that power in a way that isn't actually about either controlling or dominating others, or getting approval,
Approval or
giving others,
proving ourselves.
yeah, away. Do you find that in your coaching that this, you know, the idea of empowerment is actually quite a challenging idea for us, or not even an idea, it's quite a challenging reality for us?
Yeah, it totally is, because with that, that means all the strings that you have out there that are attached to all these things, you have to cut them, and you become the source of all of it. And it's challenging in the beginning, but the more you open that container, there's a sense of freedom that comes over you, and a sense of true knowing of yourself. And I feel like what happens with a lot of my clients is they start to connect with themselves for the first time, and just see how special and unique and beautiful they are. And
What are some of the techniques? Are there any kind of tricks of the trade that support empowerment? Are there any sort of really nice questions that you ask, or
yeah, yeah,
exercises or whatever? Like, how do you support someone to feel empowered and to live through
yeah.
their true power?
I think it's important to ask yourself the question, what makes me feel powerless? I think it's very important to understand that first. What makes me feel powerless? What situation, what person, what circumstance,
Yeah.
what thing in my life that I've gone through that's making me feel powerless, helpless, hopeless? A real teacher will really empower you to ask your own questions, and that becomes the doorway for your own freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also kind of getting a really strong sense, because you know, I know as a coach, you in general you work one-to-one with people, and I also do one-to-one coaching, but I more commonly work with groups and teams, because I'm going into businesses to kind of support these conversations. And I feel really aware that, you know, what I said right at the start, that there's really two kind of parts to what I do. There's a real necessity for both of those parts, because when you start asking those sorts of questions of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you are kind of also, I suppose, seeking for the dynamics that you have with others to
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about this kind of work is that you can't force anyone else to do it. You can't take any responsibility for anyone else asking those sorts of questions of themselves. So in the structure of a business, I can really see that whilst having the space to consider these kinds of questions is really valuable, I think to also have some tools and processes, like, for example, one of the more recent videos that I posted on YouTube was about liberating structures.
Mm.
And that is all about sort of frameworks in which you can kind of connect with people and
Mm.
really kind of harness new ideas and have a different sort of conversation with others. Yeah. It is a tricky subject, though.
Mm-hmm.
I can even feel it inside myself, like I've loved some of the places that we've got to, and some of the things that you've said, like when you talked about true power, that was one of them. When you talked about accepting self-responsibility was another one. Like there's been, and you know, asking the question, what makes you feel powerless? Like that. So there's been some real nuggets through this conversation for me. But I've got to admit, like I've also got a slight feeling of unease, like, because we're wading in here. We're
Mm-hmm.
going in, and I do think it is a really tricky subject. It's
Well,
a tricky.
I think there's a lot of fear associated with this,
Why is there fear associated with a conversation about power?
because it's so familiar to be powerless, right? It's so familiar, it's so normal,
Status quo.
it's so safe. it's so safe. And as human beings, we stick to what's safe, what's known, what's predictable. And I think when you are having this conversation, it's asking you to kind of let go of all of your ideas and all of your concepts and all your perspectives that you have lived by all these years, and start exploring this pretty much like new territory, right? So I think we try to stick to what's safe. And this is a very unsafe subject for majority of us.
I know how much work that you do, like on yourself, your own sort of self-discovery, self-awareness, self-love, and the path that you've been on. Is there an occasion that you can remember, like something when the penny dropped, or something that just felt different around you kind of finding your own true power?
Yeah, I would say it happened in the past 2 to 3 years where for me, it just, there was this like, there was this feeling that came over me. I think that also the other thing is everyone comes to self-discovery, introspective, healing work on their own timeline and in their own way. And some people never get to it. And that's okay. I think when you've had enough of something, and something has cracked you, it's like the light is coming through and you can go towards the light. And that's what often catapults people into this very self-reflective, self-discovery, self-responsibility way of life. I think for me, I was doing that since I've been like 21, when that like light, when there was a crack and the light came in for me, as it was at 21. I think for me in the past 2 to 3 years, there was this like aha moment in me where I was like, all I want is just to be myself. That's all I want. And I just have all these barriers that have, quote unquote, blocked me or prevented me or taken me away. These are all things that I perceived, and some of them are very factual: trauma, pain, rejection, wounds, things like that. But at the core of it is I just want to be myself. And if I can just let myself be myself, what else do I want? And that was a very like it was a very like scary place to arrive at, right? Because it's what I want, but there's so much unsafety around it. But at the same exact time, that's where the true power is sitting. And I think for me, just letting myself be me, it's just allowed so much of these fears to just kind of go away. And it's coming back into security within myself. That's ultimately, I think, what everybody wants, is to feel secure in who they are.
Yeah, I think because when I asked you that question, I kind of thought, what would I answer to that question? And I think I might sort of phrase it slightly differently, but I think what I would say is kind of a similar thing. I'm sure there's been various things that I've kind of had to break through that have changed maybe my relationship with my own power,
Mm,
helped me to accept my
mm,
power. Saying that, I don't even know why it almost feels taboo to even say it.
mm,
um, but the thing more recently that I feel aware of is kind of being slightly less concerned about what others think.
Yes.
And I say slightly because what it feels important to me to kind of strike a balance. Like, I live in the world, and I and I want to coexist alongside other people. And so there is actually an element for me where I want to care a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Um,
totally normal.
yeah, but I've definitely let go of quite a lot of a sort of need for external validation.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably, and coupled with that, there is a sort of, and I don't know, like, maybe it's a bit chicken and egg as to which came first, but like coupled with that is just a feeling of being more grounded,
Mm.
in like just literally in my body. I just feel more sort of, yeah, kind of like my roots are stronger.
Yes.
I feel more grounded, and that for me has been less of a kind of mental
Yes.
exercise and far more of a physical one in
Physical.
terms of meditation, or
Mm-hmm.
um just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
general well-being.
And it
Yeah.
got me thinking about how sometimes maybe we do need to ask ourselves the question, what does my power feel like?
Yeah, but I'm getting
And
like
and
it's
and
that.
and as you were describing it, I was writing down things for myself, and some of the things I wrote down were soft, gentle, loving, supportive, grounded, fierce, anchored, you know? But but when I feel those ways, I'm in my power. And it's interesting is when I feel those ways, I'm more in my body and less in my mind,
Yeah.
right? There's a presence that I'm occupying within myself now. And that's just very interesting how maybe even just exploring that question can help us come into our bodies.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I'm not surprised. I know you have gone public with this information anyway, but you are pregnant right now.
Hmm.
You're due in December. We're recording this in October, so you've got about what, 2 months, just over 2 months to go.
Yeah, a little under 3 months. Yeah.
You're doing well, and like I could really hear the influence of that experience in the words that you chose for your power.
Yeah.
Sort of, it was kind of, it was that sort of, it felt like that kind of loving, nurturing, you sort of, use the word
Yeah.
gentle and stuff. I could really hear that part of that power for you at this particular moment in your life is has that mothering
Yeah. Yeah.
vibe to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on this journey for the past, I would say 2 to 3 years of mothering myself,
Yeah,
becoming the divine mother for myself.
yeah,
And the word gentleness has been such a huge part of how I've been going through my own healing.
yeah.
And there is a gentleness to power.
Like, I love that question, what does my power feel like?
Mhm.
I also feel aware, I think you and I are quite similar like this, in the sense that we do experience things very physically, and
Yeah.
we feel things. And I just wanted to kind of throw a different idea out there, because there is this whole sort of thing around somatic work, somatic
Mhm.
healing stuff, which
Healing
is basically, it's the coming into your body. It is the
body.
physical experience rather than the mental side of it. But I also wonder if the question, like, what does my power sound like, or
Yes.
what does my power look
Look
like,
like,
like
taste like,
what does it taste like?
taste
Yeah,
like.
I just, and I
Ooh.
kind of feel like for you and I, they're probably less useful questions because we're feelers.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
just really wanted to put that out there for anyone else who might be just like more motivated by other stimulus and
Yeah.
other senses in terms of how they process, how they relate to the
Yeah.
world. I want to kind of start wrapping up this conversation, and I've got what could be a really difficult question.
Bring it on.
I think I've asked you quite a few difficult questions, so I think it's cool. I love where this conversation has gone, and I actually feel a more of a sense of ease within myself. So I can feel that we have got to a place of where I can feel what we're talking about. But how, in terms of verbalizing that, I think this is why power is such a tricky subject. In terms of verbalizing that, what are your takeaways from this conversation, or how would you summarize what we've spoken about today?
I would say that power is not something you go seek and acquire or get. It is something that you remember. It is, it is something that you claim. It is something that you own. And if you are walking through the world trying to acquire, claim, get power, it's because you are operating from fear, insecurity, or there's something that you need to feel XYZ way. And the true power is really going to come when you turn inward, look, change the perspective, turn the mirror, look at yourself, and remember that about yourself. And I think in remembering that, you'll realize that it was always there within you. That's what I would say, because I mean that's been my journey. Because I'm speaking just from my own lived experience, and I've done it, and you can do it too. So it's not this impossible task. Is it challenging? Is it hard? Is it going to bring you to your knees? Is it going to make you feel some of your deepest, darkest pains and wounds? Yes, but it will liberate you, and that liberation will then allow you to go into the world and just like live, fully live, not just like the concept of living, but fully live as yourself.
Yet again, Kajal, I want to say thank you for your time and your energy and your wisdom in this conversation. Thank you, Kajal. It's been awesome.